Hello internet friends, it's Chris Masto again with a laser cutting Illustrator Glowforge tutorial thing. Today I want to talk about how to take a file that you get from the internet that's got all kinds of glitches in it and to clean it up so that you can laser cut it on your Glowforge with fewer problems. So I want to start with this file here. Credit to Jennifer A24 on Instructables for sharing these nice designs here. There's a moose and a tree and an angel. Not really big into angels, but I certainly take the moose. So there's this cool kind of moose here. Let's say, or is it a moose or a reindeer? I guess it's a reindeer. That would make more sense for Christmas. By the way, I'm leaving all my mistakes in this one. Not so much because it's more instructable that way, but because I'm just lazy and I really don't want to have to edit this one. So I'm going to try to do this in one take from start to finish, and I may go down a few incorrect roads and have to back up and undo things, but that'll be the fun of it. This is going to be kind of a longer one, I think. So I want this reindeer or moose. So I download the file, fine, and then I open it up in the Glowforge interface after a quick round trip to export as SVG, and I get this thing going on here. Now, this isn't terrible in terms of operation steps. I mean, there's only two, and they're a little weird in terms of what's cut where. Certainly the tiling, this is too big to cut out on the Glowforge, but that's not a big deal. So you look at it and go, okay, well, I could probably handle this. Maybe it's just a color issue. I'll convert the colors. But then you look at it a little more closely, and there is some kind of weirdness going on here. So let's go into the file and take a closer look. Now, in this one, what I'd like to do is more the way I'd normally clean something up if I got it off of a website like this. So typically I would take the original file, and you can see it's just, 8 of these repeated. So rather than try to modify this, I mean, it came as a Illustrator file, so I just downloaded this reindeer.ai and just loaded it as is. But I really don't want to mess with it in this form, because who knows what's going on in this document. There's all kinds of weird colors and settings and things. So my preference in this type of situation is I use my selection tool, the V tool, not the A tool, to just grab, I want to make sure I get the whole thing, but just one set here and none of the others, and then I'll just copy that, Control C, Control N for new document. I'm going to use my Glowforge preset that I demonstrated in an earlier video. And so I get myself a nice, clean, empty Glowforge document, with my favorite swatches and everything else the way I like it. And so I'll paste that into here. And so typically this is the way I start with a situation like this. I grab the artwork out of the other file and then paste it into my clean new file. And then I can start looking at it more closely and trying to understand what's going on. So in that vein, first off, right off the bat, let me zoom in here a little bit. First thing that sticks out at me is that some of these clearly have a white fill. You can see that in the case of the antlers here, you can see the grid lines through the back of that, but in the case of the legs and the body, you can't see the grid lines. They're filled white. So I'd select that there. So it tells us there that's got a white fill. We don't want a white fill, I don't think, on any of these. The good news is if I select all, you can see here, this is Illustrator's way of saying that the question mark here means that it's different. You've selected multiple things and they don't all have the same fill. So you see, if I just select this body here, then it'll come up white. If I select the legs, it'll come up white. If I select the body and the legs, it'll stay white, right? But as soon as I select the antlers here, Now it goes to question mark because the antlers have a transparent fill, whereas the rest of the objects have a white fill. So when we select this, we can see that there's a mixed appearance for the fill, but there's not a mixed appearance for the stroke, which is nice because it means that that's all one thing, right? Sometimes you get a file where maybe there's different line weights, or there's different colors or things like that. This is such a simple thing. It's really just a cut outline that I don't have to worry about something that I would normally worry about, which is if I just go in here and select all and set the appearance, I might be actually flattening out a bunch of things that need to have a different appearance. But in this case, I know, just looking at this and also from the way it's set up here, that it'd be perfectly fine for me to go in here and just click on none. And so now I've gotten rid of that white fill, which would otherwise give me trouble. And then again, there's stroke color here. Sure, it's black of some sort, but it's not Glowforge Black 1. So I talked about this in a previous video. We really want to be careful with the colors and just make sure everything is the same exact spot color. So I'm going to select that to make sure that everything's good. And the way you know that that's not that color is because if I open up the stroke now, that's highlighted. So it wasn't highlighted before, which meant it wasn't one of these colors. If you look at the sorry, I'm trying to talk and think at the same time. If you open up fill or stroke, you will see that the current selection actually has a box around it, if that is in fact one of the options in the swatch panel. So, and if it isn't, then you'll see that none of these will actually be highlighted. So it is possible to have a color selected which is not in here. Like I could go in here, for example, and I could choose a weird color, and now, well, yeah, I think I have to close it and reopen it. Anyway, I'm trying to do a live demo, which is clearly not making. Oh, that's so that's just a tint of a all right, spot color. So anyway, forget about that whole part. Like I said, I'm not going to edit this out. So I'm going to try not to go down any rabbit holes here by talking about stuff instead of just doing. Now this looks really weird to me. It's like thin and dotted and gray, even though I know it's black. And why is that? Well, because for some reason the stroke is set to 0.001. I think some laser cutters, maybe they have ascribed different meaning to these stroke widths. On the Glowforge, it doesn't matter. I could set this to 10 point and it would come out exactly the same. But for the sake of my eyes, I'm going to set the whole thing to 1 point. So there we go. Now we can actually see the design, which is great. We can take a look at this and start to study where we might be having some problems. So in terms of, things that jump out at me, the first thing obviously that jumped out at me was the white fill, but the next thing that jumps out at me, excuse me, is the way they've chosen to do these cutouts for the press fit. Now you'll see this quite a bit in files you get from random strangers on the internet. This technique will sort of work, right? You could, cut this and cut this, and then, this middle piece will pop out, and you will end up with a cutout there. But I don't know. It's kind of weird to me to do it that way. See, I would prefer, like, if you look at the way the antlers are set up here, the path goes in and then comes back out, and that's what I would want to see here. I'd want to see this path just go in and then around and then come back out, instead of having, like, we're going to cut this and then we're kind of going to come back separately and slice, overshooting the whole thing. And then, like I said, it'll work, probably. I mean, you can probably see now. Talk about this later, but there's definitely some sloppiness going on here. And then I don't want to discuss this in too much anatomical detail. I'm not a reindeer expert, but there's definitely something going on with this path. And again, you could say, well, that's okay, right? In the end, it doesn't really matter. I guess the animal's going to have if you cut it like this, it's going to have kind of a weird shape where the tail meets the body. On the other hand, some laser cutters, that actually avoids stopping at a point and cutting darker, but you know, if that was their intention of doing that, then what about these, right? There's absolutely no loop-de-loop on these things. So I feel like that's not, you know, that's not the job of the artwork anyway. That would be the job of some sort of post-processor. So let's just say that that's an art mistake. Again, this is a great example for this, because this is the kind of stuff where, you know, somebody drew it, and I can't draw at all. Like, if you ask, I can look at this for 15 minutes and study it, and then you could clear the screen and ask me to just draw this shape here, and I wouldn't be able to. I cannot for the life of me draw anything. My brain doesn't doesn't like visually even remember what like the body of a reindeer looks like if I'm not looking at one. So I have tremendous respect for people who can draw, but doing stuff like this for CNC is kind of a weird hybrid, you know, of it's like a technical drawing kind of thing. And fortunately, even though I can't draw, I'm a technician, so I can operate the tools fairly well. So let's, you know, and what I was trying to say, I guess, was a lot of times you get, you know, somebody who can sketch something, but the problem is in the process of sketching it, you get all these little glitches in the file, and it's helpful to come back and clean them up. Otherwise, again, the laser might, you know, this might look like a continuous line that's actually consists of little pieces, and then, you know, the laser cuts here and there and here and there, and in the end, maybe you get the right result. But let's try to optimize it for the way we want this thing to work. So, enough babbling. Let's try to fix this reindeer body here in the most simple way possible. I'm just going to select the whole thing, including all of the little cutout bits, and then I'm going to go over here to my Pathfinder, and I'm going to click on minus front. And what the minus front is supposed to do is combine these shapes by removing cutouts that are in front of other things. So who knows, that might just do the job. I'm going to click this now and see what happens. So what's cool is that it almost worked. In fact, you can see, you know, the legs here, it actually did exactly what we wanted. It didn't do it on the head where the antlers go. So that's pretty good. I'm actually really happy with that, because that means that I can just select the body and the legs. We'll ignore this top piece for now. Click that, and now we've already got our cutouts there. I didn't have to do any work. And now, did you notice this? Look at that. I'm going to undo here for a second. So our minus front actually fixed the little loop-de-loop here by the tail. So if I redo that operation, boom. So one nice thing about that is you get rid of all your weird overlapping paths that can often confuse the laser cutter. So now what about the head here? Now we can address this part separately, right? So as we saw, if I just select this and then I minus front it, it actually just deletes the cutout. Now, looking at this more closely with the direct selection tool, so that's this arrow here, A, which allows you to select individual paths, you can see here that there are three pieces that are not joined up at all. So these are just three independent lines. So really, there's no shape here to cut out from the other shape, since it's not a closed path. So I'm going to show you a way to fix that. There's a tool over here. This may not, depending on what you used last, and where your tool palettes are arranged and everything, you might have to go searching for this. But hidden under the Shaper tool button, if you hold the mouse button down, there are a bunch of other things, one of which is Join tool. So if I select that Join tool, the way this one works, usually, is you use it to draw a little circle around two paths. And you see how now that gap went away and it joined those together? We'll do this again here, slower and closer. So I'm going to use this Join tool, and I'm going to draw around both of these things and let go, and boom, connects them together. So very handy tool to be aware of when you're in a situation where there are paths that are nearby but not connected. So now if we select this, you can see that is now one continuous path. So with any luck, I can now use my V selection tool, select these guys, minus front. By the way, I'll point that out just a little more slowly. I kind of said that quickly. If I'm in the direct selection tool A, and I select these things, no pathfinder. Pathfinder is for the regular selection tool, which is shortcut V, which is that arrow up there. So if I select that, now I have my pathfinder and I can click minus front, and it will in fact do the thing that we want it to do. Sweet. So we've already, if I weren't talking, this would have taken about a minute to clean that up. So easy peasy. Now let's move on to the legs. So the legs look like a very similar situation to me. So the first thing I want to do is just see, is this going to work? Sometimes you get lucky right out of the gate. So what if I select the whole thing, kind of like I did with the reindeer body and minus front? No, that didn't do it. Okay. So maybe we can get this one and then worry about the legs later. That didn't work either. So minus front there seems to be just deleting the cutout. Now why could that be? Let's zoom in and see what's going on. So I can see right here that this path does not actually, these again are not joined, and this one doesn't overlap that one. So we got a bit of an issue here. So let's just start. How about we'll start with the join tool and just try to clean up these corners. So now that at least is one continuous path, and then the remaining problem here is that this one doesn't actually overlap that. So I'm going to grab this anchor and drag it up using my shift key just for the hell of it, so that I can only go straight up. And then again, like we saw in the bottom, it's probably best if this just overlaps the other path. So now I should be able to select the two of these together, minus front, and bada boom. We're getting there fast. So now the way this design works, this part here is also supposed to be cut out, but I can already see that's not going to work. Yeah, these paths don't even intersect at all. So in case it's not visible on the screen, yeah, this is this is a bit of a mess too. So let's just start here, and whoops. So that's what happens if you select that with the regular selection tool. I need the direct selection tool so that I can just get this part, and I'm going to just drag this line so that I know it overlaps. Just drag the end, and now let's look at the whole thing. Oops, sorry, I'm not good at zooming with this particular kind of scroll mouse. So I'm just going to move up here. Oh, this is ugly. So the other thing you can do, since I have the direct selection tool on, as I highlight this path, it's only highlighting this line and not this section. So there are two lines and there's an arc, and again, they're not joined. So fortunately, our join tool will probably fix all of that with very little effort. Okay, cool. So there's that. And now let's see if we get what we want. Select both of these together, and minus front. Oh dear, that didn't work at all. So let's look again more carefully. We selected the right things, and I pressed minus front, and now what happened? That's kind of weird. It left a little thing on the bottom, and it didn't leave. It's almost kind of minus the opposite way, which starts to give me a clue as to what's going on. Another way to see what's going on here is to select this path and temporarily change it to a fill. So if I fill this in with blue, you might notice that we can't see the line for the cutout anymore. And the reason for that is because the cutout is behind this part. And minus front does what it says. It subtracts the front part from the back part. So in this case, the front part, you want the hole to be in front of the object that it's cutting out of. And they're layered the wrong way around here. So that's a relatively easy thing to fix. We can just use our control left square bracket. So I use the keyboard shortcut, control left square bracket, to move the the leg part behind the cutout line. And let me see, I don't know where that even is in the menus. It's probably Object, Arrange, Send Backward. Yeah, so that's Send Backward keyboard shortcut, Control left square bracket. Good to kind of know those. They save you a lot of time. So now let's see if this works now that the cutout is in front of the thing that it's cutting out. So we'll select both of those in minus front. And now it does in fact do the right job. And we can put the fill back to none to avoid confusing the machine. Boom, boom. Now, I could repeat exactly the same process with this other leg here. There are two reasons I don't want to do that. One is because it's a pain, and as far as I can tell, these are identical. And two is maybe they're not identical. Sometimes you get, you know, if someone was a little bit sloppy drawing this, they might actually have drawn the other one, you know, instead of copying it, they might have drawn it by hand twice or drawn parts of it differently. So I don't even want to play that game. I'm going to get rid of this entire second leg, and I'm just going to take this one. And now with your selection tool, hold down the Alt key, and you'll get a, will you? Sorry. Computer trouble. Hold down the Alt key and drag, and you will get, I don't know why the cursor wasn't changing, but that's what it's supposed to change to. It didn't do it before. You get like a little arrow with a shadow arrow behind it. So that makes a copy when you drag. So hold down the Alt key and then drag it over, and that will duplicate it instead of moving it. So now I have the two legs there next to each other, and now we fixed out of the four pieces here, we fixed three of them, and now let's look at the antlers. So I'm sure that we're going to have some trouble with the antlers. I can see right away that there are clearly some unjoined bits. But you know, one way to look at this again is like we just did a minute ago. I can select this antler group and change the fill temporarily, just make it blue so we can see what's going on. And yeah, something's weird here. That's not all filled in. It looks like they made two different pieces maybe and then mirrored them. So this here is not connected to this. It's just visually next to it. So we could go in again with our join tool and just circle all of the parts that are not connected, but there might be a faster way here. I'm going to select this whole thing again with the regular selection tool, and I'm going to go to Object, Path, Join, and see how this goes. Oh, and look at that. That fixed all of the problems in one swell command. So the Object Path Join will basically look at a thing that is in this situation where there's a bunch of stuff that's next to each other but not quite touching, or it's touching on the screen but it's not connected as far as the path is concerned. And it'll, within some sort of fuzz factor, it'll connect up all of the things that are nearby but not actually really connected. So I think that actually completely fixed the antlers in one command, and I don't have to mess with it anymore. So that's pretty cool. So now I'm kind of ready to go here. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to take advantage of the full Glowforge and make multiple copies, kind of like where they had in the original file there. So one thing about this is I set up in the previous video that I showed how to set up Illustrator, I set up a 20 by 12 artboard. And the reality in Glowforge, if you look at this carefully, I'll select one of these. You can see they sort of gray out a section here with these striped lines. So if you look at what you've actually got to work with, it's actually 19 and a half, or maybe a little under 19 and a half. 19 and a half by 11, not 20 by 12. So I think what I'd like to do here is fix this, first of all, so that I know how much space I have available, you know, and then I can kind of tile this on here and make sure that it all fits. So to do that, I'm going to go into my document setup, and I'm going to click Edit Artboards, and that'll bring me into the artboard here. I only have the one artboard. So this, as you can see, is 20 by 12. And so I want to change this to 19 and a half by 11. And you can just change the artboard like that. And so I'm done editing my artboard. And so now I hit escape. And now Control-0, one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts, just zooms the artboard as big as, because I'm messing around here with different sizes. So hit Control-0, it sort of puts you back to as large as can fit. And so now I want to take this. This is 4 independent pieces here. If we look at our layers, it's not too bad. If I were spending more time on this, I might clean this up. This path is unnecessarily in a group, but for the sake of simplicity, I don't even want to mess with it. I'm just going to select all, and I'm going to press Control-G and make a new group, because I want this whole thing to be together in one group, so that when I move it with this tool, then I'm moving the whole thing together with the selection tool. That's really the purpose of grouping here, because the grouping isn't going to affect how the Glowforge cuts anything. It does that by color, as we previously discussed. Pardon me, I need to take a sip of my tea here. I've been talking for a long time, and it's getting cold too. Now, as I previously showed, I could just hold down the Alt key, and I could just sort of eyeball a few of these over. But I want to show you a cooler way to do this. Actually, yeah, I want to show you a couple of cooler ways to do this. So, yeah, I was trying to decide what order to talk about this. Let's talk about SVG export first of all. I've been, in previous demonstrations, just for simplicity, I've been going to File, Export, Export As, and then choosing an SVG. But if you're going to be working on something and you keep tweaking it, there's a much better way to do it, which is to use the Asset Export or Export for Screens features. There are a couple different features you can use together. So I'll show both of them just because they're kind of cool. So I have this group in here. So since this is all grouped together, if you open up the Asset Export panel, what you can do is you can drag a group in there, or you can select multiple groups and Alt drag to make a thing together or whatever. And you can create one or more assets in here that you can export with just the click of one button. So, if you wanted to generate a bunch of SVGs of individual parts, or you wanted to generate SVGs and PNGs and JPEGs, different resolutions, all that stuff, that's what this would typically be for. If we're doing laser cutting, really, we generally just want the one, the whole thing. So I can set this up, and the purpose of doing this is you can set this up ahead of time, and you want to give this a name. So rather than Asset 1, we'll just call this, let's just call this Reindeer Group. Okay, so that's got a name. It's Reindeer Group. And now down here in the export settings, I've already got SVG selected as the format. If this is the first time you're doing this, you'll want to go in the menu, go to Format Settings, find your SVG, and make sure, set it up this way. Styling, Presentation Attributes, Font Convert to Outlines, Images Embed, Object IDs we don't care, decimal at least 2. Turn responsive off. Minify doesn't matter. I look at the source code of these things quite often, which is why I've chosen to leave Minify off. Most important thing, responsive off, images embed is important, font convert to. So anyway, this is the way I recommend you set it up. Set it up that way, and then whenever you set up an export here and you choose the format SVG, it's going to automatically do that for you. So the practical upshot here is if I select this asset in the asset export group and I click export, now I can put this in. I've created a oh, actually here's the thing, I want to save this first. This file is still called untitled, so I would just like to save this in my, this is from a previous experiment, so ignore the fact that there's already a file here called Reindeer. So I'm gonna set this to Reindeer, or sorry, name the file Reindeer and save it. Again, forget about the fact that I previously have done so. Okay, so this is my Illustrator file. Sorry, that got a little confusing. So the point is, you go over here, you go to Asset Export. Things near the bottom of the screen. You click the Export button. You choose a folder where you want to put the thing. And this is the way I would recommend. This is the way I like to organize my projects. I create a folder for each project. I save the Illustrator file within there, and then I select that folder for my export. And now what this will do, if I go to this folder, so this is the reindeer.ai I just saved earlier, and then the export just created an SVG subfolder, and inside of there is a file with the same name from the asset export. Remember, I called this reindeer group, so now I have my reindeer group.svg, and if I open that up, that's that file. Now, why did I go through all this trouble? Well, the nice thing about this is if I were to go in here and let's say I needed to make a change, right? This needed to be filled with blue. All I have to do to export this is just click Export here. Same folder, right? So I'm just going to hit Enter. Do I want to replace the file? Sure, hit Enter. And now my file's been updated. So to me, you know, it's a quick and easy way to get the files out of here. Now the other thing, having shown that, and I'm just going to undo my fill here. Having shown that, so that's exporting individual assets. You can also export the whole artboard. So there's a button down. There's a button down here. Launch the export for screens dialog. There's also File, Export, Export for screens, and then my favorite is Control Alt E, or Command Alt E, Command Option E on the Mac. It's late. I'm tired. I've been talking all day. Keyboard shortcut, really fast way to do this. Control Alt E. This thing pops up. The artboard is selected. The folder to export to is selected. Create subfolders is selected. Export artboard is selected, right? So Enter, done. And if I go back here, well, you see it's called Artboard 1 because, again, you can name these things. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change the name from Artboard 1 to Reindeer Panel. And again, watch how easy this is. Control Alt E, one keyboard button, Enter. And there's my file, reindeerpanel.svg. And that's the artboard. So that means that in this case, if I load this into the Glowforge UI, upload my reindeer panel file. What should happen here is that everything will be positioned exactly as it's supposed to be. And note that the artboard is not 20 by 12. The artboard does not have to be 20 by 12. Any size will work as long as you export it with the artboard like this. So you can see this is positioned in there exactly the same place it's positioned. However close to the top that is, however far from the left, same spot. If I were to, sorry, I'm turning this into a whole demo for this thing, but I think this is another useful feature. If I were to move that over, again, all I have to do to re-export this, Control Alt E, Enter, Enter, and now it will have overwritten the previous file. So I can go back in here, I can upload the file, and it's my reindeer panel.svg, and now it should be positioned somewhere around there, demonstrating that it will retain the position. So that whole 12 by 20 thing is kind of a misnomer, and in fact you should probably make, see there it is, so same position, you put it there in Illustrator, it comes out in there if you export it with the artboard. You should probably, and I wish I could go back and edit that previous video I made, you should probably make your artboard default 19.5 by 11 rather than 20 by 12, and that way you won't accidentally make something that's too big to cut. Okay, where were we? We were over here, right? We wanted to tile this guy. So that was, I think, a useful diversion because the point of that was now as I make changes, it's going to be very easy to re-export them. And I'm going to show you, I think, one more trick, and then I'll be done with this dang video. We want to tile these across, but we might change it afterward, right? So it would be annoying to do like a manual process. I showed you, you can hold down the Alt key and you can copy it like that. Well, what if I do that, and then I go in here and I edit this reindeer, maybe it becomes a camel. Notice that that only affected one of them, right? So I'd have to delete the copies and then recopy. Is there a way to avoid that? Yes, there's totally a way to avoid that. I wouldn't have mentioned it if there wasn't. You go here into Effect, Distort and Transform. Transform, yeah, it's kind of a weird place. So Effect, Distort and Transform, Transform. This will open up a panel that will allow you to apply various different kinds of transformation effects. Turn on preview so that you can see what you're doing. If I don't turn that on, then it's not visible, but if I do turn that on, I can see what's going on, right? So what we want to do is ignore all the other things, leave them alone, horizontal move, and we want to type in a number here that gets it far enough away from the other one. So I guess 6 probably. 6 inches, okay. So that will move that over 6 inches. And now see what's cool here is there's a copies option. So I can actually put 2 copies. And so now I'm leaving the original alone. I'm not moving it. I'm making 2 copies that are each 6 inches across. So if I click OK here. Now what's cool about this is if I do that thing I did before and I decide to make this reindeer, well, whatever, I'm going to give it a lofty loft. Look at that, they all change together. So this is going to be very convenient in a moment. So now I'm going to select, now we want to get the whole grid full of them, so I'm going to do the same thing. Effect, Distort, and Transform, Transform. And now it's going to be like, hey, wait a minute, you've already got this effect. Do you want to layer another effect on top of the first one? Yes, in fact, I do. So I'm going to click Apply New Effect. I don't want to edit the existing one. I want to apply another one. And turn Preview on. And now I'm going to move it vertically. I don't know, 4 inches, 5 inches. The only problem with this is the slider is useless, so you have to just sort of make up numbers. 6 inches, 5.5 inches. I'm going to call it 5.5 inches. Yeah, maybe 5.4. Okay. And now we want to make this moved all of them. We want to make a copy. So one copy leaves the original row alone while creating another row below the original row. And yes, I can hear you say, but they're on top of each other. Well, they wouldn't be on top of each other if these things were a little closer to each other. I think you might agree. So the cool thing about having used the effect to make the copies is that if I were to go back to the original and I were to move this body up, then all of the other ones would move as well. But you know, it's in a group, so how do I do that? Well, if you select this, if you actually double click a group, it will bring you into the isolation mode. So you can now edit the members of the group, which means I can select this and I can move it up using the arrow key, arrow up, and see I'm getting this. I actually can live move this around and all of the copies move in tandem, which to me is pretty sweet. So I want to now get out of this, and then I want to leave the, hit escape to leave the isolation mode. So I've got this in here, and it looks like I've managed to tile my reindeer. So I'm going to press Control-Alt-E, and I'm going to press Enter, Enter, and that will have updated my reindeer panel file. So all I need to do now is go back to the Glowforge upload, select reindeer panel.svg. Hopefully now there will be no cloud problems or no other problems, and if you've stuck it out this long, you should be rewarded, as should I, with there it is. So we have a panel of 6 reindeer that fits onto the bed. It's positioned correctly. It's all one single cut operation. So I can go ahead and run this off, and I can get my 6 reindeer and stick them together. Now, the one thing I didn't do was to actually check the thickness. So it's quite possible that in some cases these cutouts are not big enough. But if you watch this tutorial, I think you've got more than enough information now to know, and this would be the exercise for the viewer, if you wanted to do this on your own, is to download this file and tweak the sizes of these openings to make sure that you can interlock the pieces together with whatever material you're cutting them out of. So I think that's all that I wanted to show here, and yeah, this is the process that I generally find I have to go through if I download something off the internet, especially if it was made for another kind of laser cutter or wasn't made for a laser cutter at all. I hope maybe one of the tips and tricks or shortcuts in here was of use to at least one person who watched this. If you did find it useful, again, I love to get those subscriber counts and like counts up on YouTube. It gets more exposure for the videos. But for now, that's all I got.